There, I think it's working. Hello, tech writing students. I wanted to talk to you a little bit this morning about your executive summary and letter of transmittal. So you have this handout, which was the checklist of sections for your final paper. And the handout is, it's got everything listed on it, but it's not quite as self-explanatory as I would like. And instead of typing up some 5-page thing, I just wanted to send you a quick video to give you a little bit of background on both of these documents. So kind of at the top of this handout, you'll see sections for final research project, and then letter or email of transmittal or introduction. So what that is if you imagine sending this document to your final audience. So if it's a proposal, the person you're proposing something to, or if it's a recommendation report, whoever you're recommending the thing to. If it's a magazine article, you have to get a little more creative. It could be to the editor of the magazine as if you're submitting it, or you could just address it to me. But if you imagine that you're sending this thing as an email, you wouldn't just send a blank email, right? You wouldn't just send somebody something and just like have a blank email with nothing in it. You would want to come up with something to say, if they don't know who you are, to introduce yourself, definitely to introduce the topic of this and kind of explain what it is. And then also you would want to kind of have a nice formal or informal tone based on the audience. You want it to be pretty concise. So that's what your letter or email of transmittal is. In the old days, when you handed somebody a proposal or you put it in an envelope, you would do it as a cover letter, literally a cover letter. So it would cover the document. It would be the top page, and you would often paper clip it on rather than stapling it on. So it would be like a separate document on the top. I am certainly fine with it just being formatted as an email if you want to do it that way. It kind of takes the format of a business letter if you're doing kind of a print thing. So you would have all that address stuff at the top, your address, your name, the date, all of that, just kind of like when you did your cover letter. The length of the letter transmittal should be no more than a page, single-spaced. You probably want to shoot for half a page, 3/4 of a page. It depends on whether you have to introduce yourself or not. Now, let's say that your report is for your PI in your lab, or the professor that you're writing this for an independent study. They know who you are. They know what it is. So you might have a very short letter of transmittal. It might be like, dear Professor so-and-so, thank you for helping me with this and this and taking a look at my rough draft. Here's the final project that I promised you. And then you might have a sentence or two about your results that are really interesting, and then you would conclude. If it's for your peers, like I know in one of my classes, somebody is writing for his team, for his athletic team. And so that kind of thing, if it's for your peers, you can have a really casual tone, but you would still want to have something. So those of you doing a magazine article, if you, rather than doing a full letter of transmittal, if you would like to incorporate it into the article, like a letter to your readers or something like that, that's kind of introducing yourself, like an about me sort of section, you can do that. That would be a fine way to do a letter of transmittal as well. So that's what the letter of transmittal is all about. And then you have, depending on what kind of document you're doing, magazine articles and journal articles won't have this, but complete reports will have a cover page. And so the cover page, it's just going to have your title, your name, who you're presenting the work to, and the date. Then those complete documents, recommendation report, proposal, business plan, that kind of thing, will also have a table of contents. If you're doing a magazine article or a journal article, you don't need a table of contents because you can imagine that the magazine itself would have a table of contents, and then your article would be in there, and it would be one of the items. But if you have a table of contents already for your magazine article, that's perfectly fine. You can totally do that. If you're doing it as a blog post, and you want to do a table of contents, you might have it so that when you click on section title, it jumps you down. So it links you to it. You certainly don't have to do that though. So then the next item on here says, okay, there it is, summary or abstract. And there might be a question as to whether you need a summary or abstract and what exactly are they. So an abstract is for academic documents. So if you're writing a journal article or you're writing up your primary research for your PI or for your professor, you're talking about a lab, that would be an abstract. Abstracts are about this long, single-spaced. They're usually, it depends on the journal, but they're usually somewhere in the 150 to 250 word range. They're just all one paragraph. Sometimes they'll let you do a couple paragraphs. So they're in paragraph form. And you have all read abstracts when you've seen, when you've read journal articles. It starts with the abstract and then it goes into the introduction. The abstract is a standalone document. You want somebody to be able to read your abstract and get everything that they need out of it in brief. So what's the importance of the research? What's the key problem or setup from your introduction? What were the key items of your methods? What did you find roughly? Maybe a sentence or two about that, and then a little bit concluding it, or maybe you end with your results. But it's like all the highlights without any of the details. Or I guess with the results, there might be a detail in there. You might actually have measurements or something like that. But you want to kind of imagine, it's like an elevator pitch. If I had to explain this to a person in, the space of 1 minute, what would I do? The same principle is true for an executive summary. And those of you doing an executive summary, this would be if you're writing a proposal, a recommendation report, an analytical report, a business plan, those kinds of documents that are presented to an audience in a more business context. So the executive summary is kind of what it sounds like. It's a summary for an executive. It's a 1 to 2 page document, and it's basically the first thing. It goes even before your introduction. And in this 1 to 2 pages, you would describe all of the highlights. So just like what I talked about with the abstract, all the highlights without much of the really gritty detail of your analysis. So you have to give away the punchline. It's not just an introduction where you say this paper will discuss, and then you kind of talk about the things that you're going to analyze and some conclusions that you might come to. You're actually giving it all away in the beginning. The executive summary should stand alone as a document. It should be a standalone document. Somebody should be able to read it. So the executive, your boss's boss, should be able to read it and then walk into a meeting and talk really intelligently about your paper and be able to pretend that they read it. So what I think of the executive summary about, as, and I wish I had one to hold up for you here. When I was a teenager in school, they used to sell these things called Cliff's Notes. I don't know if any of you have seen them. Cliff's Notes are, I guess, the website equivalent to Spark Notes. When you were in high school and you maybe didn't want to read the entire text of Charles Dickens's Hard Times or Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice or Hamlet, and you had a lot of other stuff going on and the book just wasn't hitting you, and you thought, let me look it up online and try to piece together what happens, and then I'll be able to walk into class and speak intelligently about it and fool my teacher. That's what Spark Notes and Cliff Notes were, and Spark Notes still are. So Cliff Notes, it'd be this like booklet, maybe 20 pages long total, and they'd sell it like on a magazine rack type of thing. And it looked like a bumblebee. It was neon yellow and black, and it would say Cliff's Notes, and then it would say like Hamlet on it or something like that. You'd open it up, it would have a plot summary, it would tell you all the main characters that you might need to know, it would discuss some of the main themes that you might need to know, and be like, in brief, everything you need to know to walk into your class and pretend you read the book. That's what your executive summary is. It's the Cliff's Notes for your paper. It's everything that somebody needs to be able to walk into a meeting and pretend they read your paper. So you do want to give away the punchline. Then you might be like, well, if I've already introduced it with an executive summary, do I need an introduction? Yes. Think of your paper and the executive summary as 2 completely separate documents. They happen to be together, but each one should stand alone without the other one. So that's kind of what an executive summary is. As far as length goes for the summary, my very unscientific suggestion to you, for a paper of this range where you're looking at like something in the 10, well, yours is 15, but if you're looking at kind of the 10 to 25 or 30 page range, I would make your executive summary no longer than 10% the length of the paper. So let's say it's a 20-page paper. You could do a 2-page executive summary. Let's say it's only a 10-page paper, which I know you won't do for this class, but let's say that you're doing something in another context. You would want your executive summary to be 1 page. That doesn't hold up as you get entire page counts. If you're writing a 100-page document, you shouldn't have a 10-page executive summary. I think, maybe if you single space it, 3 pages max, regardless of if you're summarizing a 200-page book, or, a 100-page document or a 50-page document. Any more than that, and it starts to become its own long document that you have to read. So that's kind of what an executive summary is. It gives you more leeway, more freedom than an abstract. An abstract, you have to do in like paragraph form, and it's fairly academic. With an executive summary, you can do whatever you want that fits on those pages. You could include that table of comparison stuff that you included in your conclusion. You could bring that in and say, well, this is my key points, so I want it there. You could include an infographic that you put together or a flowchart. Anything like that is totally fair game in an executive summary. Basically, you're like, if I only have 2 pages or 1.5 pages to convey this information, how am I going to do it? And you do it in the best way possible. So that's what an executive summary is, and you should have one of those if you are doing a standalone document like a recommendation report, an analytical report, that kind of thing, business plan, marketing plan, so some of the more business-focused documents. Those of you who are doing magazine articles don't need an executive summary. If you've already written a summary, great, you can include it, no problem. That can be really helpful regardless. But you don't have to include a summary or an abstract if you're doing a magazine article. So that's one of the things that is a little bit different about that format. And then everything else doesn't have caveats about what you should include. You have body sections. You have appendices if necessary. So if you have some random extra thing that you wanted to include, but it's too technical for some of your audience, or it's just too much detail, but you're like, I would love to have it there because I want people to be able to reference it if they need to, then you would include it as an appendix. So that's kind of what appendices are all about. A couple of you have asked about the works cited and how to cite things. You can use MLA or APA or whatever style you use for your lab reports. It should be something. In-text citations you could do in the format of that MLA or APA style, where you do like author's name and page number for MLA. For APA, it's the year and the author's name. If you want to do it the way you do your lab reports, where you have like a superscript 1 and then that maps to something in your works cited, that's fine with me. You can do it. Just basically, I need to know what information comes from what source. If you are doing figures and you want to figure out how do I cite my figures, you don't have to incorporate that all in the same works cited as the information that you're citing. I would suggest doing a separate section called image sources or figures or something like that, where you go through and you map which figure came from where. And with that, I'm okay with it just being a URL. You don't have to have a full MLA style citation on the figure sources, but you should have a full citation, MLA or APA or something like that, for everything that you incorporate information-wise into your paper. So let's see, what else? Okay, so a couple of you have asked with the body sections of the paper, do I need to include section headings and subsection headings if it's a magazine article or something like that? My suggestion would be yes, you should, because the length of this thing is so long that if you were to write a whole magazine article with no section headings, that would be a lot to take in, right? You can be a little more narrative with your section headings. You can have a little bit of fun with it, but you would still want to break it up in different ways so that somebody would maybe know when the natural pausing point is if they're going to move away from this article and then come back to it again. And you can take a look at some of the examples on Canvas as well, and that'll just kind of give you an idea of how to section things off. But regardless of what type of report you're doing, you're going to have to think about the organization of it and how you section things off. There are a bunch of really good examples on Canvas. They will showcase some of these features, including some of them. I hope I included letters of transmittal for them. Sometimes people had sent them to me separately, and so it didn't get uploaded with the paper. But with a few of them, you should be able to see a letter of transmittal that is included in the file, and so you can get a feel for what that looks like. If you have any questions, I'm actually going to be here. I said about 9:15 to 1 today, and it's 9:38 right now. So I'm around. I'm like enjoying a cup of coffee, and I'm going to be getting some presentation grades in. So I'll be here, and it's real quiet and nice. Go grab a cup of coffee from Stanley's over there and come by. And ask me all your questions about your paper. I'm super happy to help. When you do submit it, you can submit it on Canvas. I've set it up so that you can upload it either as a file, like a PDF or a Word doc or whatever. I don't think I've put any restrictions on what kind of file you can upload. But by the way, I do not have a Mac, so don't make it an Apple-specific format. If you're in doubt, just PDF it. If you're doing it as a blog post or something that's available online, I've also given you the opportunity to upload it as a URL. So if you turn in a URL, that's fine. And if it doesn't work for whatever reason, I'll let you know and you can go fix it. But I'm assuming that it'll work just fine. So if all of that fails and you're trying to upload it to Canvas and it's just not working and you're like, what do I do? It's 11:59 p.m. Just email it to me. Just email it to me. That's perfectly fine. And so I know many of you are turning this in tonight. Others are turning it in Sunday if you've saved your extension for this final paper. And if you're turning it in Sunday, you can do it anytime Sunday. So that's a little bit kind of about the deadline on it. Thanks, everyone. I've enjoyed your presentation so far. I cannot wait to read these. They're going to be so awesome. Yeah, it's just going to be a delightful December. I love final papers. I think they're the greatest. And so I'm really looking forward to reading what you all put together. I hope that you're enjoying writing it. So yeah, thanks.